I didn't expect to go from summer straight into winter, so the flowers remain on our interest slide. The winter cold has arrived and conditions are improving from our September and early October drought conditions. Will we continue to improve? Jeff, Chris, and I will talk about where we have been and what comes next in the November edition of the Water Resources Outlook.
Okay, thanks, Todd. So here it is, the last 30 days of precipitation estimates across the southeast. And what a change from the late summer for many areas. Most of the southeast at least saw a couple of running high in some areas. This is the 28-day average runoff graph, which is derived from the stream flow, also showing the unprecedented fall in runoff from stream flow in the late summer, and then the incredible recovery we've had here in the fall. So, of course, drought has diminished, and here is the latest released on November 7th, and we see drought conditions are still there, but we have seen quite the improvement. Now only about a third of the region in drought. And also good to point out, nearly a 30% improvement in coverage of drought and severe drought. Another good point is that we have had minimal flooding as well. Some droughts improve with floods, and so this one has improved with minimal to no flooding, which is also good. As far as the tropical season, the Atlantic has actually been somewhat active, but the Southeast has really been spared the significant flood-producing tropical storms. Dorian gave us a scare, but it ended up just long and off the East Coast, and really we only saw a few storms affect the Southeast and 0 storms that brought what we consider significant flooding to the region. A good break from the past 3 years prior, where we saw 3 significant flood-producing storms for 3 years straight from 2016 to 2018. The tropical season is not over yet, so we continue to monitor the information from the National Hurricane Center, but we'll also say the weather patterns right now really not favorable for tropical weather to affect the southeast. So what are we looking at coming up as far as stream flows this winter? Well, looking at the analogs for neutral ENSO years going back to 1950, we see as far as December stream flows, pretty mixed. Maybe some signal for lower stream flows along the east coast of Florida and higher stream flows for Georgia and the South Carolina. But the probabilities are still only slightly favorable for this. Same for January. Again, we see that slightly favorable probabilities for the east coast of Florida for below normal stream flow and maybe above for eastern North Carolina, but mixed elsewhere. So Todd and Chris, they'll talk more on the meteorology and the outlooks ahead for rainfall. That will also be a basis for our winter stream flow outlook at the end of this water resource outlook.
We're beginning the period under high pressure just after a cold front moved through the southeast. As we go through the short-term period, an area of low pressure and associated rainfall will develop ahead of another cold front. This low is expected to lift northeastward across the Florida Peninsula. The low will still be in the vicinity of the coastal Carolinas as we move into the midterm period, and will continue to bring precipitation to coastal Carolinas. After the low moves out, models are showing another low forming further south over the Florida Peninsula. Here's the 7-day precipitation forecast, showing precipitation associated with both the low that's forecast to lift northeastward along the Carolina coast and the second low in the midterm outlook. The long-term outlook calls for near normal precipitation amounts for most of the southeast. Models are currently indicating another cold front could move in by that next weekend.
Thank you, Chris, for getting us through the midterm forecast. I show the ENSO conditions in the southeast because, as Jeff mentioned earlier, his analogs are based on neutral conditions. And at this point, while the equatorial Pacific temperatures are above normal, it doesn't look like there will be an El Niño conditions as we go into the winter and through the spring. Our CPC forecasts will reflect that. And here is our temperature forecast for November. This was issued at the end of October, and short and medium range models hinted at cold air moving across the eastern half of the nation. We are now in the midst of that. The Climate Prediction Center's forecast from earlier in October had most of the country above normal. While climate signals can help us make a long-term forecast, making these forecasts is still a very difficult thing to do. It looks like this update is a pretty darn good forecast. The rainfall forecast looks reasonable, and while we have seen improvements to the drought recently, it's going to be a close call as to we end up with above normal precipitation in Georgia and South Carolina and into North Carolina. Most of the area would benefit from that rain as we slowly creep out of the drought. The longer-term outlook for November through January shows us with equal chances of above, near normal, and below normal rainfall for the southeast U.S. However, some of the neutral analogs hint at us being wetter than normal during different parts of the winter months. It's something we will watch very closely and update during our December Water Resources Outlook. The longer lead outlook from February through April again shows equal chances of all of those same categories. If a pattern develops, this could change the forecast. Again, we will look for those patterns and update you in December. So our outlook for the winter time frame for our rivers show most of the southeast getting back to normal, with the Savannah Basin being the only one we still have some concerns about. Part of that comes from the series of reservoirs needing some good rain to recover from our most recent drought. Otherwise, as Jeff showed, stream flow over much of the southeast has returned to normal, and normal rainfall should bring us out of the drought. And so, the bottom line, in the short term, it looks like we'll have a continued active weather pattern, and that should slowly start to improve the drought conditions. We should hopefully start to see some of that yellow go away, and maybe if we're lucky before the end of the winter, we will be out of our drought and looking forward to spring and summer. But until then, as far as the longer term goes, neutral ENSO conditions, and as Jeff mentioned, that can possibly show some rainfall over much of the southeast, but usually normal, with some areas maybe getting a little above normal during different parts of the winter. The exception is that east coast of Florida, where those analogs tend to hint at being a little bit drier for parts of the winter. So we'll watch that, and we'll get to update you again as our next Water Resources Outlook will be recorded on December 19th, 2019. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next month.